I had this insight when I was at P&G that everyone was disconnected. They didn't know what was going on. So every month I had a phone call with everyone, and every quarter we did like a variety show of the best marketing in the company. And everyone watched it, got inspiration, got to know what the company was doing, and it brought some fun.
Marketing for the Now is the most contemporary show about what's actually happening. Marketing is going through one of its biggest transformations ever, where this thing controls the game. And there's so many things we pay attention to, but we get to talk to the brightest and best minds in marketing on Marketing for the Now.
Carrie, welcome to Marketing for the Now. We're in Cannes, but the first thing is say a few words about your company.
Excellent. So I am the Chief Customer Officer for a company called GWI. We're market research on demand. So in 54 different countries, we interview about 3 billion people to figure out their interests, where they're putting their attention, their behaviors. And most of the companies that are here, the tech platforms, the media companies, the agencies, big and small, and the brands, most of them actually purchase through our platform the data to tell their own stories on the streets of Cannes.
What a cool purpose.
So yes, I'm here supporting
Absolutely.
them. Yeah.
So what's been surprising to you from this massive amount of research you've done in the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
Interesting that for me, every time, whatever the topic is, when I go into the GWI platform and I look for what we've got, it does vary by demo. So different age groups do care about different things. So for example, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, we went in and did some questioning about how people felt about it and how they wanted brands to respond. And the older generation was like, I don't want brands to touch it. I want my toothpaste to be nice and foamy. That's what I care about. Younger people were like...
Press can do that, by the way.
Okay, bring it on home. Younger people are like, well, if you don't stand for what I stand for, I will not buy your toothpaste.
Wow.
And
I get that question a lot.
Almost every topic, it's very similar. And so, while I think as an industry, we'd like to say demos don't matter, but I actually
Gen Z, it matters.
Yeah, and so there's so many panels here around Gen Z.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why. It's because they probably do think different than maybe if you're marketing to boomers.
So if a Gen Zer finds a brand that takes a position that's not aligned with them, how do they react? They don't buy it? They get active about it? I mean, I know it's a generalization.
Yeah, probably varies, and the topic matters also, right? But they like to express their opinions in social a lot.
It's positive.
Yeah.
It's positive for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a breakfast this morning with a tech platform, and I said, what insights are you giving your clients this week? And a lot of it was not like, oh, here's how to spend money on my platform. It was like, here's how to pay attention to the DMs on the platform and have infrastructure ready to react to it. So it's less about, hey, how do I create a viral video? It's more about when something goes viral, you got to be ready and you got to address it. So I thought that was really interesting coming from someone who literally's day job is to sell a tech platform.
Yeah. So we're talking about attention a lot this week. Gary's got a new book out about attention. So I want to ask you, the first company you worked for coming out of university or college, what was that?
It was the Peterson Institute, where I was helping people recover from heart attacks and strokes.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Well, thinking back then, how did the Peterson Institute garner attention to themselves and what they did? How did they do it?
I'm so going to help your I'm so going to help your narrative. Direct mail.
Direct mail, of course.
Door to door. I was literally hanging those things on people's doors in Arizona.
And it worked?
No, it went out of business.
It went So was it a bad product or bad marketing or both?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Okay. Now, fast forward to today. You're studying attention like crazy at your company. So what's your advice for people who you have to get attention before you get obviously it's related to awareness, before you get trial and all the fundamentals in marketing. So what's your learning about how to get attention today?
I like where Gary's taking things, which is a lot around pay attention to the marketplace now and address the now.
Versus
Don't
the
try
future,
and think too much ahead. Don't think what's past is past, although there's probably good fumes and data in that, which I believe in, but that here and now is so interesting. So it's more about how are you setting up your company to pay attention to the here and now. What tools are you using? What org design have you put in place to allow for people to address it? So for example, one thing that's sort of interesting that I found in the data is 20% of the people that are going online today are not starting with search, they're starting with a chatbot.
Yeah.
20%.
I am now. I flipped.
Literally 6 months ago, that was not the case. And 6 months from now, I don't think that might be the case either. It'll probably go up or down. But as a marketer, how are you going to get in on that action?
How are you?
What are you ready for?
How are you going to get into that action?
I mean,
it's not easy. Search we get. We know how to
do
it.
Totally. Well, it's interesting. A lot of these AI companies do have a chief revenue officer. They
call
do.
them.
They do. So a lot of these companies are trying to figure it out, but there is someone to call at a lot of these companies to help you get in on that 20%.
What's getting your attention in Cannes this week?
I'm really excited to see actual activation around women in sports.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You know, because we're all paying attention to it, obviously, and the numbers are up, obviously. But when you get to places like Cannes, and you see money is really being spent, they're courting advertisers, they're doing the right things by the ecosystem by being here, that's very encouraging to me.
What's your data tell us about women in sports?
30% of all women are really into sports, and when I say really into sports, I mean they follow 15 or more sports. Like really into sports, and 30%, that's a lot of us. That's a lot of us.
Yeah.
And the other stat I would say is another 33% of them are very influenced by the ads they see in sports and actually purchase something based on an ad they saw while they were playing while they were watching basketball, golf, et cetera, et cetera. So not only is this a bigger audience, they're prolific and very passionate about it for engagement, and they're very influenced by the money CMOs are spending there. So the whole narrative's really holding up. It's not just Caitlin Clark, who I'm a fan of. It's way beyond that. It's way beyond that. But the Caitlin Clarks are bringing, like the stat I just told you, it's 6 months old.
It's changing already. Yeah.
So it's probably only going up, but the spend should be there based on the way people ingest this stuff. I've
done so many podcasts where women's sports come up, and we've talked. Deloitte's very big on women's sports. The money, hasn't followed as it should have. You're optimistic that it is happening now. The money is following the people, the consumers, the viewers, the audience.
I think because of the last stat. I think because the money's flowing. And let's be real, like the money does need to flow in order for that to happen. So I do think upstream.
Still not where it needs to be.
Yeah. Right. Someone was really excited. I was listening to a panel where they were talking about $1 billion in spend versus I think 157 billion in men's. Yeah. So everyone was like, yay, 1 billion. And then like, well, a little way to go. Yeah. A little bit.
So our assumption when I was at P&G was women impacted almost all purchase decisions.
Interesting.
Probably we were in household categories, but I find it true in lots of other categories. So if we're in the attention business, which we are, women's sports is a great vehicle for women to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And they are the purchase decision makers in a lot of categories. So what's your data telling us about that? I mean, if you had advice to the CMOs listening or the marketing people about how to leverage women's sports authentically to gain attention to what they're doing, what should they do?
I think this is where you might want to put some behavioral targeting on top, because what we see in just the women's data, not just women's sports, but the women's data is very intersectional. There's not really one flavor here. I mean, it's 50% of society. And so, unfortunately, it's kind of like the same rules that apply to good marketing apply to marketing to women. Yeah. And there are a lot of brands that are doing some interesting things. The good news I would say about women in general in marketing is I think this is good news. More women are entering the workplace and staying there. And I know during the pandemic there was an issue there. And so we're seeing that come back. I think about 46% women have surveyed said, yeah, I'm in the workforce. And here's the other stat that's kind of nice. The problem sometimes for women is they're in the workforce and then they still have all the household duties. And so we're actually seeing their responsibility around household duties go down.
Oh, so there you go.
So the amount
Finally,
of women,
right?
The amount of women who claim to be grocery shopping has gone down. But it's still in the 60% range, so they're still doing more of the grocery shopping as an example, but it's going down. So they're working more, they're sharing the responsibility, and a lot of brands are doing interesting things with this data. So like Danone or Danone, depending on where you live, they used to have a tagline that was like, for the moms, and really cater to the moms, and now they're, in one of their yogurts, it's for the moms and dads. because
yeah,
guess what?
yeah.
Dads are going grocery shopping too.
Yeah.
You know, and so the data just shows that. So there's some really good reactions from brands to it.
There's a good tool. Instacart's new campaign about people out enjoying themselves. Hey, we're grocery shopping. So there's also lots of tools now to help women and people at large spend more time what they would love to do and get the other tasks done in a more efficient way.
Yeah, it's frighteningly easy to spend money on Instacart. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, sure, I do need that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I know you have some research about video and video advertising. Tell us about what works, what doesn't these days. Let's talk about Gen Z because it's different by cohort.
Yeah, true, so true. Yeah, that's where I started, right? I should back that up.
Yeah, exactly.
I should keep going there, shouldn't I? So interestingly enough, time spent online is flat, and time spent in social media is flat. Now, maybe because it peaked so much during the pandemic, so you're like, okay, so it's not going down, but it's not going up as much as people with teenagers would tell you. And so what we're sort of seeing is it just in digital and social media in general, it's normalized quite a bit. There are three things that I think are growing there when it comes to digital messaging. So they're spending the same amount of time on these tech platforms, and they are spending a lot of time on video, let's say, versus text.
Sure.
But there's the increase in messaging on Meta platforms, TikTok, et cetera. Everything's a messaging app, and it's like in almost every major app, it's up by 10%. So I think that's sort of interesting. So it's not video for video's sake, but it's like you come in for the entertainment, but you stay for the functionality.
Wow.
And so the messaging's gotten
So
a
what's
really
driving
interesting
that
thing to pay attention
behaviorally?
to.
Why? Why is that happening?
I
do
think
you
people
think?
do treat these as connection tools. I do, I mean, this is Snap's sort of bread and butter, and even their messaging is still going up, the use of messaging on their platform. So I thought that was it's not necessarily answers the video per se, but just kind of as you get into time spent and attention, the messaging is key. The AI thing I thought was really interesting, and then short form video.
Right.
All numbers we see on every platform.
How short? Shorter is better.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, probably,
Yeah. So how about yourself? How have your habits changed on the platforms? Are you doing more messaging? Are you spending more time or less time on certain platforms?
Yeah. I have teenagers, so I try to go where they go, in the spirit of being a proper parenting stalker.
Yeah.
So I'll sort of ride their wave, although they're like, "Stop friending my friends, Mom." Like that's
Maybe their
weird.
friends like you.
Well, because I'm like, well, this is how I get in on their lives and understand what's sort of going on is seeing the whole group. But so I'll follow kind of where they follow, so it's sort of the obvious ones. But for me, I like I'm really into podcasts.
Yeah,
So
me
I'll just
too,
sort of
actually.
say, And one of the things I like about yours and a few others is I like to understand the process behind the thing that I'm ingesting. So I really enjoy anything that will kind of expose me to the behind the scenes, the process of it, right?
Yeah.
So like you're like when you ask like how was this campaign made?
Yeah.
Right? It's like I love the campaign, but like how the campaign was made and the insight that went into it, and how'd you convince people in the boardroom to do this? Like I was with United yesterday, and they have a whole thing about Oscar the Grouch, and I was like, yeah, great campaign. How did you convince that boardroom to make Oscar the Grouch part of your campaign?
What did you learn? What did you learn?
Easy. A good idea is easy to sell.
Yeah.
They were like, it was such a good idea, it wasn't that hard to sell.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was sustainability information and insights that sparked them to even think about that campaign. So I guess there's that. Yeah.
So what inspires you about your teenagers?
Their passion. We'll debate about politics, and I'll bring data to the table, and they're like, "Ma, I don't care. I feel what I feel. Passion still matters. Like, you got to make people feel something first and foremost, and then you can bring your data all day long. But this is how I feel, and know all the data you bring, because I'm in insights and data, is not going to change my mind. This is how I feel." And so it just like reminds me to like feel all the feels, because they're so emotional.
That's an important insight.
Yeah.
For our listeners and for brand builders.
Yeah, in our generation, you know.
Yeah. To understand their passions and figure out what role you play.
Yeah, and let them have it.
Yeah.
Don't try and stop it. Why
Right,
would you
right.
stop something so beautiful, you know?
That's a beautiful place to end.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, Lisa, welcome to Marketing for the Now.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's great to be here.
We're in day 3 of Cannes.
Yes, we are.
So what's getting your attention in Cannes this week?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm a can newbie.
Oh, first time?
This is my first time
Oh,
at Can.
my God.
It is
How are you doing?
overwhelming. not to be very
You should start
clear.
meditating this week.
I know, exactly. I definitely packed the schedule a little too tight, but there's just so much going on, right? Anything from really impressive stuff that's happening at the Stagwell Beach with all of the rise of, how you think about females and sports marketing, all those things, which is really kind of lighting a lot of creativity around that one. I love seeing kind of this as people kind of embrace AI and not as an adjunct thing, but in what they're actually doing. I'm starting to see it really embedded, which is very different from other conferences that I attend, where it feels like AI is right in your face and it's something extra that you do. Here, I'm starting to see it really kind of put into the core. So it's part of the team instead of like an adjunct player, which is really kind of fascinating to see. And from a marketing standpoint, you start to think about all the things that'll start to open up for us, from running how we run our marketing organizations to how we really think about redesigning those organizations to how do our business redesign themselves. So it is fascinating to watch everything transpire here.
Well, you're EY, you're massive. Yep. You're doing a lot of work in technology and AI. I went to one of your presentations this week, which was really, really good. So for those listening out there who aren't integrating it quite as much as maybe they'd like, or they have apprehension, or they have imposter syndrome. Other than hiring you guys, what have you learned about smart adoption of the technology of AI? Because I agree with you, it is feeling much more integrated this year.
Yeah.
What have you learned about those who are doing it well?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First, I would say, just remember there's always a human at the center, right? So I think it's really natural to kind of fear it and not resist it, but try to figure out what's it going to do, because there's still a lot of people who are, once again, human behavior to say, what's this mean to me? And a lot of fear of, is it going to disintermediate my job and those kind of things. So I think that one of the first things I see a lot of people do is, how do you get your team just exposed to using it? So at EY, we actually launched almost a year ago now an internal LLM for our 400,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And so getting even my team comfortable using it, and they start to say, well, wait a second, this takes a whole bunch of the mundane tasks and gives me the ability to do what I really want to do. That aha moment starts to say, okay, my fear factor is a little bit down around that piece. But I think as people start to move from this kind of POC stage, just in general, into true adoption, that's what really kind of becomes important. And so at EY, we will tell people look, there are lots of use cases. I'm sure for your CIO, you're getting 25,000 of these use cases of people. And we would say, look for the pattern. So find those use cases that are using kind of the same base level of data. Make sure you get that data actually right. So it's putting you in the right direction, and do all your use cases off that single pattern so you can really experiment. So you as a kind of technology organization don't get yourself bifurcated across. So you can really figure out what's there. You can see, is it driving productivity? What's the other ROI metrics that we want around those things? So I think that's when you start to get it truly integrated and it starts to change your business.
So how have you personally used AI to improve your daily work or optimize it?
Yep, we're doing, from a marketing standpoint, we're doing a ton, right? We'll do what you're hearing everyone, the content
Sure.
pieces around that one. We were just talking before we walked in around kind of synthetic data. So we're doing a lot of experimentation right now. We will do a lot of pulse research. So what's on the mind? How can we find that micro trend? And right now you're doing a lot with research companies, and it takes you 6 weeks still. It's faster than a normal big, but with synthetic data, right, and synthetic research, I can actually start to
Talk about
stand
what that
up.
is for listeners who don't know synthetic research.
So if you think about synthetic research, it's really looking at how do you find your customer grouping on some audience platform, and you're looking for those kind of trends that are there, those kind of things that you define it. And instead of asking a human, right, you're feeding those into the model, and you're asking those to actually create an outcome based. So based off of everything Jim does online, I know he does X, Y, Z. How would he most likely answer this question? And it will pull it up because I say, I want to talk to marketers. They're like, oh, well, here it is. Right? And it starts to feed it to me on exactly what it may be. So for me, for my team, once again, too, we have to run them side by side. You got to show them the correlation Does it work? Does it not work? But you start to think about the rapid iterations that we can get on market research. It becomes pretty insightful.
Yeah. Now, attention is a big theme this week. Gary has a new book out about it. You talked about women's sports earlier and sports at large. I mean, if you walk up and down the big Croisette, the big street in Cannes with all the tents and beaches and so on, the most crowded is sports.
Yes.
So what are you learning at EY about the power of sports in getting attention for a brand or a cause or an organization?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think I've always been a big believer of you have to intersect people and their downtime, right? So in those moments where their guards are down, I hate to say, all of us, and when we're in business mode, we filter, right? And
Sure we do. Yeah.
Things aren't coming in, so I gotta intersect people in those kind of downtime moments. And what I think is really interesting is you talk about the share of mind, right? Or people talk about share of wallet to share of mind, and they start to get to share of heart. I think where you really hit nirvana as a marketer is when you have share of lifestyle. And the sports gets you kind of into that understanding that share of lifestyle. And so that's where it kind of starts to play this critical moment. What I would say, what I actually learned here is that there's volume and eyeballs is one thing, engagement is something very different. And so how do you find those micro segments in sports where I can actually not just get share of eyeballs, but I can actually get really share of engagement? And so thinking very, very thoughtfully of how you're using that is important. But I love the fact that it is share of lifestyle.
Yeah, no, it's a great concept. So at EY, you're like, many brands or organizations, you're seeking to get attention to your company with a certain message. How has that changed over the years? How long have you been at EY?
I've only been at EY about 3.5 years.
Well, even in that time, how has it changed?
I think that it's a big thing for EY is, so when I was brought in, we actually started EY Consulting, moved from an advisory to consulting. And my kind of remit was, how do you build the consulting brand? But oh, by the way, you can't break the beautiful legacy that we have. So we have this, great legacy and heritage in tax and audit. And if you think about that, a little bit more conservative. But if you think about technology and what we're doing in consulting, a lot more innovative, kind of how do you move that? So how do you build the brand within that piece? So very, very kind of difficult and interesting. So what we've really done in the last couple of years is we key into kind of obviously the key buyer audiences. What are those buyers? What are those issues? And you start to think about, how do I do what I'll call direct to client, things which I am going to go talk to a CIO about, I am going to talk to a CMO about, versus things which are horizontals. So AI that cuts across, and how do I market across those kind of pieces becomes very different. And so you just get a much more kind of complicated rubric around how you're doing these things.
Sure. What are you learning about what's on CMOs' minds? We're here in Cannes, they're all over the place. There are themes, of course, coming out of Cannes as there are every year. What are you learning about their most pressing issues? Yeah,
so I would say there's kind of three main things that are coming up. One is this kind of excitement, but yet fear of this. We always look at this unicorn of hyper-personalization and audience of one, and how do we get there? And AI can potentially get us there. But how do you do that in a very responsible way? So how do you think about kind of responsible AI? The second kind of tension that we start to see, and we're talking a lot about, is around your teams. So how do you kind of think about training and upskilling and reskilling your team? Had a conversation with a gentleman, he was talking, hey, we're going to launch a product, and it's going to take all the BDRs, business development reps, out of the cycle. And I was like, well, that's cool. But don't BDRs become sales reps at some point? And so how do you train? And so if you start to think about that piece and training and upskilling with AI, like how do you actually do that? And then a very big conversation around ROI. So if you start to think about those three tensions, and we've actually done a bunch of research with Adobe around what those three tensions may be, you really start to kind of gravitate that conversation pretty quickly. And I don't think that anyone has a silver bullet. We're all kind of experimenting and learning from each other. And I think that's part of the power, I think, of Cannes is having those networks. And how do you then have this network of individuals you're saying, wait, we talked about this. Did you try it? Did it work?
Yeah. So last question. You're Cannes first time.
Yes.
You're in the middle of the week. What are you going to do when you go home with your team about this experience?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I'm going to bring more of my team here next year by far. But I think that, going in and saying, like, here are the top things that we've clearly learned. I want them to start experimenting. I do want them to start experimenting more with sports marketing. I do want them to actually think about how you're building AI into more things for this kind of hyper-personalization audience one, but not just audience one, but what I would call contextually relevant. Like, how do you do that? And then the other thing I would say to them is, remember, AI is powerful, but with great power comes great responsibility. And so we have to think about how we do it responsibly. And at the end of the day, it's about velocity, right? But velocity, if I'm a math person, right? So if you think about velocity, it's about speed and direction. So AI is going to give us that speed, but the human is going to be the compass that's going to give us that direction.
It's a good headline.
And that's what I would tell them.
Good headline for our discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lisa. Have a great week.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
I feel fun conversation.
Ty, it's good to see you again.
Wonderful to see you again, Jim.
We should get it out in the open. We have a history together.
We sure do. We co-hosted a conversation.
We did 2 years ago
2
at
years
Cannes
ago.
on B2B marketing
That's
with
right.
B2B CMOs.
That's right.
Very powerful.
I enjoyed it.
And your
Yes.
presence here has gotten even bigger.
Yeah, so now we're at the Carlton, and I love the colors, the vibrancy, the rooftop, and
great.
it's amazing. B2B is here. We're here to stay.
I just walked in the A&A meeting earlier today.
Yes.
The Growth Council with all the CMOs. It was all B2B marketing.
Love it.
That's how they began the day. So it's arrived.
It's arrived.
It's starting to get more and more creative, right? More and more awards.
Yes, and that's always been the intent. You know, to shine a light on it, shine a light on what's possible for B2B creativity, and it's wonderful to see the evolution.
So you've been at LinkedIn at 8 years. That's
believe
a
it.
long time at that company. It's evolved in a massive way. It's a brand most of us can't live without, and that's the ultimate statement
thank
about
you.
a brand.
Yes.
I mean, what would we do without it?
It's necessary, and actually, I'm not just saying that because I work
No,
for
it is.
LinkedIn,
It
but
is.
It's the platform. Even before I LinkedIn, it was at LinkedIn. I can say that I invested in LinkedIn. I was on LinkedIn because it had real value, and I've gotten so much from it.
How has it most changed since you started 8 years ago? We're talking about attention today. You know, attention is a fundamental in marketing and the changing nature of attention. How did you get attention back then with your audience, and how do you do it now?
Yes. Well, I think one of the things that has not changed is just recognizing with human things that resonate, that connect. And when you think about attention, it's this idea that it's not necessarily just the shiny object, but it's the story. You know, humans are not logic processors, humans are story processors. So LinkedIn is a platform where people are talking about things in a professional context. But I think for me, then and now, it's always been about what's the story behind this thing that's happening. It's not just the thing that's happening, but what is the point? What is the substance? What is the thing that resonates? What is the connection? What's the context? And even what's the funny thing? So it's not just because we're on LinkedIn, it's let's be robotic. Let's talk about, there's so much more to business because we spend so much of our lives there that we should be talking about inside of that conversation. And that's probably the evolution point. I think there's a broader conversation happening because people recognize that business moves everything. So if whether we're talking about government, whether we're talking about politics, whether we're talking about life and choices we're making at home, there's always a context to talk about that on LinkedIn.
Why do you think that's changed?
I think
Because I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm using it in a different way. I'm posting in a different way. And it's, it's way more than, I don't know, a business tool. Way more. So what has driven that? Why is it? It's been.
It needed to.
Okay.
It needed to. So, you know, I think because there are like schools of thought. Some people are like business only. Take that to somewhere else. We went through a global pandemic. We've been through a lot of different things, a lot of uncertainty, and people crave connection. People crave, like, let's have a deeper conversation. Let's have something meaningful beyond just the business story. So the conversation on LinkedIn had to evolve to meet that. And I've seen people on the platform I want to see more of it. Like, we're here, and there's Sports Beach. I want to see more athletes.
Yeah.
There's always a professional context to the story of what we're doing. And I think what we're seeing is a growing, more inclusive conversation happening on the platform because it's warranted, given the environment and all that we've been through over the past couple of years in particular.
it's such a massive, massive database
Mm-hmm.
of interesting things. So is there anything that you could share with us about what you're seeing from the activity that people are making public on LinkedIn? What should people be aware of?
Yeah.
Because there's a big batch of human behavior with so
It's a
many
huge-
insights behind it.
Yeah, so I mean, when you say that, it makes me think about our economic graph, right? So the economic graph is a digital map of the global economy, and it's made up of all of the businesses, the companies on there. It's made up of all the conversations and voices contributing, schools. So if you think about all the data that's on LinkedIn,
It's life.
that's it's life. That's what makes up the economic graph, and the way that we bring the economic graph to life is we can see different things that help us predict where things are going. And that's why we work with groups like the World Bank and the World Economic Forum to look at things like where are jobs moving, what skills are on the rise, what skills are on the decline. And so we're 1 billion members now.
That's crazy.
I remember when I joined, I can't remember where it was, but to be where we are now, and you imagine the amount of data.
There are a few brands in the world that have 1 billion users or consumers.
Right. Right. So
Very
there's
few.
like a rarefied air, but that makes it even more important. And I think the role that LinkedIn can play in helping us make sense of where things are going, because I think a lot of the conversation tends to be on what's going wrong, what's on the decline, and we could probably spend more time also thinking about where are things going, so we can intentionally make decisions. I know sometimes we need to look in the rearview mirror and assess what happened, but I think we can also spend time looking where the car is going and seeing how we can meet the moment as well.
And what's your advice from what you're seeing for our brands listening?
Yes, so there's a lot of things that are changing right now. For marketers in particular, budget challenges, layoffs.
Sure.
Everyone's trying to figure out, like, what do we do with AI? What decisions should we be making? At LinkedIn right now, we're talking about the movement through different phases. So, there was the goods economy, the knowledge economy. You think about spreadsheets and data and like the work that you go to the office and you do the work. And where we see we're moving right now is this idea of the relationship economy. And people talk about soft skills versus hard skills. And I think actually soft skills we should call them human skills. Because I think it's a better description of what they are, and it's like your ability to show up interpersonally with people, to talk about things that inspire people, to understand the context in which you're having a conversation. What does spark attention? How do you hold attention? How do you captivate? This is where things are going. And so we just did an annual benchmark report at LinkedIn. So we surveyed 2,000 B2B marketers to get a sense of things. And I believe what's required for us today is to, first of all, understand that we're moving into this relationship economy space, and to then think about how we enter the era of what I call the Swiss Army knife marketer, which is really just being a sort of a jack of all trades, like a data scientist, a content creator, a storyteller. I think we're going to see more CMOs that have all of that, because they're being able to navigate politics. It may sound a little scary. I think it sounds like an opportunity. I think it sounds exciting.
Last question. What's exciting you in Cannes this year?
Oh my goodness, so many things. Well, one, the ongoing conversation, I have to say it, around B2B. Right, this is the third year of the creative B2B line. It takes time for a cat to build a category and for it to take hold. So the ongoing conversation around B2B, I think in our space at LinkedIn, this is the largest group of B2B marketers I've seen coming through, and in the space, I think there's a growing B2B conversation. Years ago, when we were hosting the event together, a CMO said to me, this is the first time I feel like B2B belongs here.
Wow.
And so I think, and we just launched a B2B documentary as well. So that's fun. That was a lot of fun. It's out there. It's
My
it's
plane,
like that's a plane ride
plane
viewing.
watching,
No,
yeah.
absolutely. But the idea is to shine a light on the stories of the people behind the work, right? It's
That's your brand essence, right?
You know, it's our brand essence, and I love a good underdog story, right? I think we're making our way from like this underdog story to like people being really truly connected to what it is that we do and the difference that we make. Because I think for a long time, and this is probably a marketing challenge in general, we understand what we do. So we are growth engines for the business, and that we help marketing pipelines be fatter. People pick up the phone for salespeople. Talent comes, pricing power. So we get that, but that's not always conveyed and understood. So if we're going to defend budget and earn the opportunity to be bold, those are the things we need to shore up, and that's part of the conversation we're having. How do we do that? How do we make sure that there's a famous quote it was like Rory Sutherland quote. So he's a famous behavioral scientist, Ogilvy marketer. He said that when marketers talk about marketing, it's like talking about the healing power of crystals. And I love a good crystal, but we also need to claim territory in terms of what we really bring to business. And so that's also the exciting part about the B2B conversation we're having here.
That's a great place to stop tonight. It was wonderful. Good to see you again.
Wonderful to see you again,
so
too.
Happy to hear about the developments in B2B here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, David, to Marketing for the Now. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. It's your first time in Cannes, which I think is amazing. So why did you come to begin with?
Generate new ideas. We've been really successful at Perdue over the last 2 years with our advertising and communication. We've hit new records with the brand and really looking for stimulation of how to raise the bar.
Super. Are you here with agencies, your team? How did you come?
Came by myself, but our agency is here.
So what are you going to do when you go home with all this in your head?
Try to figure out how to raise the bar. We've got a new management team, a new CEO, and he's got a pretty clear directive. He just wants to be the best at everything. And so the best at digital, the best at creative. We're hearing from our customers that they really need Perdue to step up and be the leader in protein, where they say we're the most kind of respectable, recognized brand in protein, and they want us to act like it. And so we've got a great brand, and we've got to do a lot of things basically to help our customers better. And so, we've been meeting with some of them and just having that, just trying to figure out how to be better.
So what's captured your attention this week in Cannes? I know we're at midweek, but, we have a couple more days to go, but anything in particular, any conversation or lecture or experience you've had?
Yeah, I mean, in general, just the inspiration of kind of being around a bunch of creative people. It's like being at a sporting event with a bunch of healthy people. You feel creative when you're around them. Actually, a really good conversation with one of the folks that we do business with, and I think like we were talking before, the way that they're thinking about using consumer data across their platform to help folks like us be more efficient with our marketing, but be a better partner with the customers that we deal with. That was pretty powerful. They're talking about stuff. So I've got a PhD in economics, and they're talking about stuff that is basically like a perfect pricing model, really trying to figure out some interesting stuff that's, you just don't really hear about, and just the access to data that these companies have and how they're using it to make the consumer experience better, but also better for the customer was pretty exciting.
So how did a PhD in economics end up in marketing?
I came up on the analytics side.
You did?
So I started my career in the direct marketing business building targeting models for junk mailers. And then, a regression model's got a lot of information in it, and so using that information basically to communicate with creative teams and kind of just went up in the organization. And as marketing became a lot more quantitative, folks like myself with those skill sets became kind of more valuable.
Yeah, fantastic. Now listen, what was your first job when you came out of college or university? What was your first job? What company or brand?
So the first company I worked for was a consulting firm in Washington, D.C. I did consulting for the Office of Water. Then went back to school to get my doctorate. And then after that, so while I was in my PhD program, we had twins. And so I needed to make money. And so I was going to go teach. But my first kind of job out of my doctorate program was as a statistician building regression models for junk mailer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So when you think about your company back then, how did they get attention? And how has it changed now to this point where you're working at Perdue now? Obviously, You're trying to get attention to your brand, your products, your story. What's been the biggest change in the course of your career in how to garner attention?
It is so much more complicated.
Yeah.
You know, Perdue's a really good example of a company that's had to change. You know, when Frank Perdue branded chicken, I mean, your experience, you know, there were 3 television channels and advertising was
big share of voice.
Big share of voice, and he had a great message and worked with great partners and authentic, and he was the founder, and it just came across great. So the family is still, they're very involved with the business. Jim Perdue did a lot of the stuff his father did, but in the last 15 or 20 years, it's gotten extremely complicated. Trying to communicate with consumers, there's not 3 channels, there's like 3 million. And so trying to figure out how to get our message across, and our message has gotten more complicated. So we're a 100% vertically integrated company. How do you get all the great things that we do across to a consumer? And you can't do that in, you know, a 15-second ad. So trying to be a lot more, you know, diligent and specific and, you know, just identify how we want to use the different marketing channels to get different parts of our message across as you kind of transverse the funnel of communication. That's been different. And so, you know, hiring people that can think like that has been a challenge.
What's been the biggest change in the organization to do that? I mean, it's a kind of a different organizational model than when you're making a couple 30-second spots and buying them.
Yeah, the marketing teams had to become more, there has to be more quantitative people. There's got to be people that can take that information and translate it into creative. And you need agency partners to be able to do that as well.
Yeah. So what, as you think about all the shifts you're doing and how you're trying to communicate on all these platforms, which ones do you think are most promising for you right now in terms of the platforms for you to get attention and awareness for what you're doing?
I think the big ones, you know, we're finding it wildly successful on Instagram. We've done all the platforms. Instagram right now is the most efficient and effective for us. We've done some interesting things on TikTok, and that's starting. What we've got to do is we're trying to figure out, we're trying to get trust as a metric to be much more much more robust with our consumers. So how to get a trust message across with those different platforms is the challenge of how we're looking at how we use them.
Yeah, what are you learning about that? Because, you know, trust is a deep emotion, and these platforms are pretty ephemeral in terms of how we, you know, are messaging on them. So how are you thinking about it? What are you learning?
So, you know from your experience, so, you know, trust directly correlates to purchase, but me going out there and telling people to trust us is not going to work. The attributes that we have as a brand, that's what we're trying to figure out, the things that we do different, knowing that we're vertically integrated, knowing that we're family owned, and communicating to people on those social media platforms about those things. Hopefully that will engender trust, and then they'll purchase. And then trying to use that content with, you know, strategic customers that we have, that customers trust. So for example, Target. Our target audience actually shops a lot at Target. If I can partner with Target and communicate our information with them and through them to our consumers, the idea is maybe, and using those platforms to do it, that might engender more trust with our brand.
What you're obviously big in the nutrition business and mealtime and all that good stuff, and you have a lot of different product and offerings. What are you learning about health and the health? And we've been talking about health for as long as I've been working, and the common trope was people talking about, but they still eat unhealthy. That seems to be shifting in terms of beverages as well as food. So what are you learning about that?
I mean, we have 85% of the U.S. population buys chicken. They eat it 4 times a week.
And it's seen as healthy, right?
And it's seen as healthy, you know, but they want more convenience. So what we're learning is they still want the healthy aspect, but how do you make it more convenient? And not necessarily things that are, you know, like chicken nuggets or things like that. How do you make the product more convenient? 70% of consumers will buy fresh chicken and take it home and freeze it. How do you make that something that not only do you put it in your freezer, but then when you want it, it's easy to take out? So making healthy products more accessible and easier for consumers to use is going to make health more easy for them to actually be able to, you know, execute.
So what are you looking forward to this summer?
Relaxing a little bit.
Family time, relaxing.
Family time, yeah. We've got a pretty big, you know, we're actually doing a lot of our prep for our budgeting process. So we've got a lot going
That time
on,
of year.
and prepping for back to school is a big time for
Yeah,
us, and
sure.
so that's a big focus of ours.
Great. David, thank you for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and welcome to Cannes.
Thank you very much.
Right. Tabitha, welcome to Marketing for the Now. This is not the first time we've met, correct?
That
So
is
why don't you recall the first time we met, if you can go back there.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, I started working at Procter & Gamble in Mexico City back in 2003, and I remember my first month in, I was an assistant brand manager for Mr. Clean, and one of my friends was like, "Let's go. We're going to this marketing hour," and I'm like, "What is that?" "It's a Stengel marketing hour," and I was
In
like,
Mexico City, right?
in Mexico
Yeah.
City, because you would broadcast those, right? And I went there, and that's the first time I saw you, and I'm like, wow, this is the CMO of P&G, and it was so inspiring, and the content was so great, and I literally said to myself, I want to do that one day. I want to inspire people. I want to be a CMO of a company, and 21 years later,
Here you are.
years
Oh,
later,
love
here
that.
I am.
I love that
Yeah.
story. Well, it's a good lesson. I had this insight when I was at P&G that everyone was disconnected. They didn't know what was going on. So every month I had a phone call with everyone, and every quarter we did like a variety show of the best marketing in the company. And everyone watched it, got inspiration, got to know what the company was doing, and it brought some fun. And so anyway, it's a good lesson for all of us. So congratulations on being a CMO 21 years later.
Yeah, thank you.
And you're at a great company, McCormick. I grew up not too far from there.
Oh, yeah?
So I
Where?
grew up just at the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, a town called Lancaster. You live in Baltimore.
I do.
How long have you been there?
I've been in Baltimore for 10 years now. Yeah, I actually ended up going there with P&G when I was working on CoverGirl, and I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of the innovation for P&G Cosmetics at that time.
Wow.
Yeah,
Biggest difference, P&G versus McCormick?
I would say just the categories. One has a lot of food and one doesn't.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're great products. It's all CPG. It moves fast, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. This is your first time in Cannes,
It is.
correct? So what's your take? We're in day 3. Is it overwhelming? Is it wonderful? Is it everything?
I think it's everything.
Yeah.
I think I woke up this morning and I'm like, is it Friday yet? Just because there is so much stimulus going on everywhere and so many things to see and so much great content to absorb. I think also the connections are irreplaceable. What you do and how many people you can meet
agree.
here that will help in the business,
Yeah.
in life, in other things is just fabulous.
I
and that's
totally
been
agree.
my favorite part.
Yeah. So we're talking about attention a lot this week, right? Gary has a book out about it, which I think is wonderful. What's getting your attention in Cannes? Is there a speech or a person or an experience or anything you've had so far?
Well, I would say I think there's a lot going about culture, and there's a lot going about being in the now with the brands. And for me, that's really important because the world has changed a lot, right? There's just now a time for brand stewards to actually be in the moment, and to do that, you have to be of the moment, which means you've got to stop thinking that you can plot and plan everything, and you've got to change the way you're working, and you've got to take advantage of those Kimset marketing moments that come by, and really be authentic and organic with that content.
How do you do that at McCormick? Because it's a different org model, right?
It
And it's a
is.
different planning cycle.
It is. But you know what? I think you plan some of it and you leave room and build ecosystems to move with a lot of agility. And I'll give you an example with Frank's Red Hot. I hope you're familiar with the brand.
Yeah, I am.
You know, it's a brand that
It's in
has
our fridge.
Yeah, it's a brand that has a tagline. I put that bleep on everything. I don't know if you're going to bleep my bad word, so I'm just going to say it that way. That brand is just phenomenal. And you know what happened was 3 weeks before the Super Bowl this year, we were watching the Buffalo Bills game. And what happened there? I don't know if you remember, but Jason Kelsey ripped off his
Yes,
shirt.
I do remember.
And that moment was just so...
And he had a beverage in his hand.
Yeah, exactly. But it was the irreverence, you know, that authenticity that came through, that swagger. And we saw it and we're like, he would be a perfect fit for Frank's Red Hot because it lines up really well with the brand personality. So we paused all of our Super Bowl plans that we had been working on for a while, and we reached out to him. We had a contract signed in a couple of days, and we decided to leverage him to help us push Frank's Red Hot, to help us own Buffalo Chicken Dip because we wanted to do that. And we said, he's going to bring our tagline to life. He's going to go and put that bleep on everything, on every single food that was advertised during the Super Bowl. And that's what we did. And it was amazing. And I will tell you, it was so good because we were able to partner with all these brands. We literally opened our phones and we started calling all the marketers. We got Oreo, we got Nerds, we got Doritos, we got Mountain Dew, we got Oikos the yogurt, and even non-food brands like Bounty and Elf came into play. And we were able to have more than 35 brands involved in our activation the day of the big game. And it was fabulous. And I'll tell you, those CMOs and their teams were fantastic because they were able to see the opportunity and take action with it really, really fast.
That's such a beautiful story about gaining attention for your brand and being of the moment and rewarding creativity and speed. So how do you scale that? I mean, how do you sort of try to do that every week, every day? How do you do it as a leader?
I think there's two parts of it. There's the part, I think from a brand and business standpoint, I don't know if you can fully scale that because I think those moments come very organically, right? So I think it depends on the brand and the moment you're trying to fit, you go after that. I think the other piece is we leverage a lot of influencers, especially in the food world, to be present in those moments. Those influencers are fabulous at their trade when it comes to creativity of recipes, when it comes to producing the content for it. And we just partner with them and we're able to get a ton of content from them that people love so much. I mean, with our campaigns with influencers, we reach millions of consumers. We get them to save, hundreds of thousands of them save the recipes. They share the recipes too, which means they're going to buy the products. They're going to cook with our products. So that's huge for us. And I would say the other piece is like encouraging the organization to think differently, to build trust with each other, right? Because when you're trying to sign a contract in 2 days, you can't go your normal process. You've got to get everybody on board and say, we're going to make this happen. And that's the mindset we're trying to bring into the company every day.
So you're working a lot with the lawyers, a lot of collaborative work with the lawyers.
A lot. Procurement, our lawyers, but this is not our first time we've done it this way. So we know that when opportunities go, we're all hands in and we make it happen.
Yeah. So the biggest change, you were P&G back in 2003. What's the biggest change in gaining attention for your brand from 2003 to today? I mean, there's obvious ones, of course, but what do you think is the most profound one?
I just think one of the things is the way consumers are engaging with the brands is just so different because it's not about the brand telling the story. It's sometimes about the story being told by others, by the consumers, by influencers, by celebrities. And you have to be comfortable with that too, because you can't control that messaging to the fullest, but that's what makes it organic. That's what makes it authentic. And that's what resonates today. I mean, I was reading a stat the other day, about 70% of people say they've bought a product after they've seen it from a branded influencer content, right? Because they're trusted sources. So that's different. And that's why a lot of the models have been shifting now to support those ecosystems. But you have to be ready to take risks and you have to be ready to let go of control a bit.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important skill for a CMO today?
I think it's being able to connect all the dots. And what I tell everyone is, I feel like my job is being in the middle of everything. I'm in the middle of sales, I'm in the middle of supply chain, I'm in the middle of the business, I'm in the middle of everything. And my job is to be able to connect those dots and put together a holistic plan that brings the opportunity forward. Because I think sometimes people in the different functions only see their area, but we have that ability to connect that for the organization and show them that 1 + 1 = 3.
So you're going to go back home after this amazing week in Cannes. What are you going to do with your team the first day back together?
Well, I am going to put a debrief of everything I've seen here that was very relevant to me, that moved me, and that's also very relevant for them to understand. And I think it's one thing is my direct team, which are my marketers, but I also want to do that with my peers at the C-suite. Because I think it's important that everybody in the company understands a lot of the great takeaways from here, so we can all row in the same direction.
Well, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of this ex-P&G'er who came to my CMO program in 2003, my marketing hour. So well done. It's been great to catch up with you, and congratulations on everything.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here with you, and thank you for being such an inspiration.
Well, thank you, Tabata. That's so sweet. Benji, welcome to Marketing for the Now. It's nice to see you. We were chatting a bit before we started recording, and you used two terms to describe yourself. One was a non-traditional marketer. The second was a heat-seeking missile. Right? So we have to start there.
Okay.
So tell us about why those two phrases are good descriptions of Benji.
Yeah, well, I better be careful and make sure next time I say off the record. I guess as it relates to untraditional marketer, I think of myself as a business leader first and foremost.
Love that.
And that's how I approach problems. That's how I approach my role. That's really how I came into the business of marketing. I didn't start as a marketer, and
Or just aren't.
I started as an international economist. Actually working on, if you can imagine, microchip dumping cases from China and from Asia, which has now come full circle as a big topic in the world. So I do like to look at the world in a macro sense. I like to look at data. I like to understand the analytics and strategy and thinking behind things. And then marketing, which I think of as communication, storytelling, an ability to influence through salespeople, one-to-one and one-to-many, being a way that I can help drive growth in a company. And so I'm a little bit reverse engineered maybe from some more traditional marketers, and that's why I think of myself that way. On the second topic of heat-seeking missile, it's funny, I had a leader I worked for who said to me the other day, whenever there's a problem, Benji says, give me 2 weeks and I'll come back. And I tend not to answer off the cuff very often. I like to gather data and information and then formulate a point of view. And then from there, once I've identified where I want to head, I tend to be very focused. And so as relate to heat-seeking missile, really drive to either a solution, drive to a theme, drive to a topic. And I think as we were speaking earlier when I talked about heat-seeking missile, I like big topics and big themes and big challenges. And I think we talked a little bit about my going into the world of retirement, not my own retirement, but as people get older in this world.
Yeah.
And I was actually at a dinner 2 nights ago in Cannes, a New York Times dinner, which was fabulous. At the end, after we talked about the 25-year-old and the Gen Z and culture, and someone raised their hand and said, I'm the head of AARP, and our largest demographic in the world today, and will be in the world, are those people that are 50 years and older. And so we, as businesses, can't forget them. We shouldn't, because there's a real profitable opportunity.
Big time.
And retirement, we need to make sure that they have enough funding to live dignified and healthy lives.
Yeah. So you like these big issues, problems. You like to think about things before making a decision. That's rare. Most leaders feel like they, in the moment, make a decision, be decisive, move the organization forward. How have you managed to, because I like it, I'm that way as well. I'm comfortable saying, I don't know, or I need to think about that. Let's meet next Monday. How have you managed that as you've gotten more senior?
It's a great question. And I thought about this just the other day. I have a team of 700 people around the globe, okay? They are responding day in and day out to those immediate asks, needs, and opportunities. I think as a firm, and I think any organization, should give permission to 1 or 2 people to take their time and to deliver and build longer term, maybe more thoughtful solutions. And what I've found, I'm very proud of, particularly the work I did at CBRE in the last almost 5 years, is the work has more than stood the test of time. And so that's where my theory has proven out, in fact, to be true, at least in this case. So we just took a look back. We built new brand positioning about 2.5 years ago. And we put it in the market, and it was during COVID, so we got as far as we could get in terms of really inculcating into the business. And I said to my team the other day, it's time to reboot. It's time to re-energize it. It still holds true. In fact, it's more true today than it was then. The business is now ready for it, so let's give it a little bit more energy. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, absolutely.
Short-term,
what attracted
long-term.
you were JP Morgan Chase, doing retirement. Now you're in commercial real estate. What attracted you to that category, that topic?
It's a good question. The phone call to have a bigger remit was very interesting to me, without a doubt. And this was to be CMO for the entire company, where I was not at JP. And with that comes multiple stakeholders that I was now marketing to, not just our customers, but a big part of it, I realized when I got into it, was around our people and our talent and investors, and that's very compelling to me. Secondarily, I'd say it's actually an adjacent category in many respects. So I don't know if you know this, I didn't know it until recently. Real estate is the largest investment asset class. It's bigger than stocks, it's bigger than bonds, and it's a big part of the alternative space. And there is a huge increase in interest in allocating to that asset class. So that was interesting, at wearing my old investment hat. Then the other piece of it was something tangible. It was something we saw, we knew, we could touch, we could feel, etc. So that really became interesting to me.
So you're in Cannes. Yeah, right. So you're in Cannes for the first time.
Yeah.
Why'd you come?
FOMO.
FOMO, yeah.
But in truth, I wanted a little bit of in touch with, as we talked about the long and short term, I wanted to get in touch with a lot of creative energy that I felt happening in the marketplace that maybe I could not as efficiently get access to. This is a very efficient way to see everyone, hear what the trends are, meet some people that I might not have met otherwise. And I didn't want to feel like I was leaving anything on the table for my organization, that I could bring back the best thinking. And it's proven to be an amazing, amazing few days.
What's captured your attention here this week? A dinner, a person, a presentation, a headline, a campaign?
Again, I'll go macro on you again. I had two very different dinners, Monday and Tuesday night. Let's just say one was with the New York Times and one was with the UK, I think it's called the Daily News, like the Murdoch family. So, and then in the middle of the day, it was a discussion with Edelman around their trust barometer and the topic of politics, culture, and brand, and how those things intersect. And so that is permeating clearly everything that that's going on in the world. And again, that is a pretty big macro topic.
Yeah, for sure. I was on, Guy Raz interviewed me yesterday on the Amazon stage for How I Built This episode, and we went there. Politics, branding, marketing. How's it all work? How's it fit? When should you have a voice? When should you not?
Yep.
So we're learning our way. And there's no easy answer to that. And to some extent, it is contextual. And you just need to be in touch and be thoughtful as you are. So what are you looking forward to the rest of the week?
I have a couple more discussions with people like you on a variety of topics. One is around sustainability. One is around another passion area for me, which is the importance of understanding employee experience and how it impacts customer experience. And I don't think there are enough, I like to talk about Chief Marketing Officer Plus or CMO Plus. I think our roles are very expansive.
Yes.
I'm interested in that expansiveness. Yeah. And starting to lean into talent as a way to do that is a really exciting way, I think, to really drive impact in organizations. So that's something that I'm going to be talking about later this afternoon.
Well, have a great rest of the week. It's
Thank
been
you.
lovely meeting you.
Same.
And I hope you go back with all sorts of ideas. Sounds like you are.
Yep.
And you're meeting with your organization when you go back. And
I am.
Doing
debrief, for sure.
Yeah, they'll love it. They'll love it. Thanks, Benji.
Thank you. Great to meet you.
Yeah, same
Appreciate
here.
it.
Same here. Maggie, welcome to Marketing for the Now. It's good to see you
Good
again.
to see you.
Former guest of the CMO podcast
Exactly.
and a fabulous episode.
Thank you.
I
Thanks.
so enjoyed it. So I can't wait for this, even though it's going to be a lot faster.
Okay.
Now we're in Cannes. How many times have you come?
This is my third can.
Third, so you're an expert.
Right.
Now we were talking before we started recording about things just need disruption.
Yeah.
So can you talk about what you meant by that?
Yeah. Well, I'll start off by saying that, like, pound for pound, I think this is the best event that our industry does. There's nowhere else that you can go where truly everything that you would want to do, everyone you'd want to meet is here. I often say, I think in my head about, I should go to New York City for a week. I should have 5 days of meetings, bang all this out. That never happens,
No, it
as we
doesn't.
well know. So not only is everyone here, but the decision makers are here. This is a senior crowd, so people that have the authority to say, let's do things.
Yeah.
It almost feels like you're starting on third base when you're here. You can kind of skip the introductory meetings, the 2-3 rounds of
jump
that.
right into it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that you have to have on Zoom and all of that back home. So this is great. I will hopefully continue to come for as long as possible. But I think that being said, there's a big opportunity to think about, like, what has become. It started as this festival for creativity and the work, and it's obviously blossomed into so much more than that. But it's hard to keep up with. There's so much programming going on. There's so many distractions. You're pulled in a lot of different spaces. Feels like there are different tracks, if you're a creative, if you're kind of more of an exec. So I think a lot about that when I come, as do I know a lot of people. Truly, how do you get the most out of this week?
So how do you navigate it? What's your strategy?
I think you have to start early with your intentions for the week and really say, what's in it for me, my role, my company, my brand, my team, and, like, be pretty strict about what you say yes to. And, if you're not going to get anything out of it for you as a professional, for your company, that should be a pretty quick no. I think I talk to a lot of people who kind of say yes to everything and then decide
Then they cancel a lot.
They cancel last minute.
Yeah.
They decide what they want to do when they're here. But this year, my team and I, we really came in with a plan and said, here's some objectives that we have. We want to talk to these types of people for these types of creative challenges that we might be having right now. And so if that's the objective, let's say yes to things that lead us towards that, and let's say no to things that, like, might be nice to have, but we can maybe do that meeting back in the States.
So when you go back home with your team, how do you keep the energy going? How do you take all this inspiration and put it into action?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is, how do you translate it to your team members that aren't here? Because there's a ton of FOMO. Everyone's seeing it on social media. It looks a certain way on social media. And so optically, that can be a challenge. And so we really come back and pretty quickly, sit down with our full team and say, these were the takeaways that we had. And we sometimes get, really tactical, even if it's about, these were the types of meetings. We preferred lunch meetings as opposed to business, dinner. So, like, really get specific in what we learned here and make sure that then we bring them into that next round. Let's say we talk to a production partner here that we think might be great for us to do something with. Okay, there might have been 2 of us that were in the meeting here, but how can we bring that next level in and really feel like they haven't missed too much, as we kind of start off on the journey.
We were talking before we recorded about how it's hard to see the work because there's so much else going on here. But what has struck you this week? Has there been a meeting or a dinner or a conversation or a lunch or a person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always am rooted on the creative side. It starts with good storytelling. We have a really high bar for the creative work that we like to see at United. We've spent a lot of time focusing on that these last couple of years. So that's really where my kind of lens and bias is, who's doing really interesting creative work? How are people doing it, at scale, at speed? A lot of the conversations I've been having this week are on what's the balance of external partners and what you can do in-house, and we live that every single day. We have a great team internally that does a lot of our work. We also have great external partners, and I'm a big believer in playing to people's strengths. We now know this is what we can do well at United, but here's what we can't do well and where we need expertise from the outside world. But we also know that about our partners. Maybe we've asked 3 or 4 times. I think humor is a good example. There are places, where our brand likes to play with humor. We actually tend to do that better internally than working with, some of our external partners. And so, after you've tried that 4 or 5 times, you're like, we just got to play to people's strengths. So it's been interesting to talk to peers at other brands to see what are your internal strengths, what do you use an external partner for? Is it wildly different than how we approach things?
Yeah.
So that's been fascinating.
I went to a Liquid Death presentation, and they do it all inside because they understand their brand and they understand their sense of humor. I didn't see the presentation on humor with Keenan.
I didn't either. No.
But I was eager to see that. I'll try to watch it when I
Yeah.
get home. Some of this will be available online. Listen, you've done an amazing job at United. We talk about attention a lot this week. Gary has a great book on it. You've done a great job at
thanks.
getting
Thank you.
attention to your company and brand by doing different things. So what have you learned about getting the right kind of attention to United versus, I would say, 5 years ago?
Right. Well, thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it starts with throwing out that playbook. I think you and I probably, have talked about this in the past, but there's truly nothing that we do today that's the same way that we did it pre-pandemic. And that is every element of what we do in terms of process, who our partners are, creatively, how we want to show up. And that really started with, here's kind of the world of airline marketing that for a long time had been a sea of sameness, as I like to say. And we said, let's try and punch above and out of that category. Let's not be so obsessed with what our airline competitors are doing. Let's just think about ourselves as a great consumer brand. And so that means we're gonna, if we want to measure ourselves against the Nikes and the Coca-Colas of the world, we are certainly gonna have to do things, differently than how we've done in the past. We have great support at our company too. We're able to try new things. It might work, it might not, but that's really because we've built a foundation of trust internally and we tell everyone where we're going. I like to think of it as, when you go to the doctor's office, the doctor will say to you like, okay, you have a cold, so in 3 days, this is how you should be feeling. In 6 days, 7 days, you're not better, you call me. You have to know the plan and the diagnosis and the treatment. And so, previously at United, I think this discipline, marketing, advertising, was for like a select, group within the company. And I understand, the thinking behind that. We've kind of taken a different approach these last couple of years of, I'll go to any meeting within United to tell people what we're up to, because when people are bought in and they understand, okay, here's where we're going in 3 days, 6 days, 3 months, 6 months, they're so much more excited. They're apt to help out. And it almost feels like we have the whole company rooting for us, which is an awesome feeling.
Is there anything, you said you changed everything throughout the playbook?
Yeah.
Any platforms that are most helpful, any process you've implemented that has been most dramatic in terms of your change and your results and so on?
One thing that, is a free tip, for every brand out there that we've had a lot of success and I think has helped us be able to take, even more meaningful risks and calculated risks is how we show up organically on social media, just with our tone of voice. Primarily 5-6 years ago, social media was a place for customer support for us. If you tweeted at us or messaged us on Facebook, it's because you were going through the airport and you needed help in your moment of need, and that was faster than, calling us on the phone. We still use social media for that today, but, we really show up as a fun personality. We sponsor over 27 sports teams, and we used to maybe like their Instagram content. We now are almost laser obsessed with we want to be the most liked comment on the football team's, Instagram post that we comment because we want it to be witty and just super relevant.
Entertainment.
Exactly. And so once you kind of get some success and the team's feeling good after that, it's easier then to say, okay, let's try and make some waves in a different way. But that's one area that I continue to it brings me joy every single day to wake up and see, what can we do on the internet with Taylor Swift, with one of the sports teams that we sponsor, with a TV show on Netflix that everyone's watching?
Beautiful. So are you going to a Penn State football game this year?
Yes, I will be going. Well, I'm very excited. And do you have USC connections as well? I can't remember.
Probably do.
Okay, but are you California based?
UCLA. I'm
UCLA.
We're in San Diego part-time, but my
okay.
wife's UCLA Bruin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm excited because I'm going to go to the Penn State at USC game, which is played at United Airlines Field at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. We proudly sponsor USC. They fly us. They are a great partner to us. I always say they're my second favorite team.
Do you need a date?
So, yeah, I will call you, exactly. It's October, so I'm
actually in San Diego then.
Okay, we'll have to meet up, yeah.
All right, super.
It will be
We're
great.
both Penn Staters,
Yes.
just for full disclosure.
Exactly, we are.
Yeah, Penn State.
Exactly.
That's a good place to end.
Yes, awesome.
Thanks,
Well, thanks,
Maggie.
Jim. Thank you.
Claudine, welcome to Marketing for the Now. We're here in
Thank
Cannes.
you.
Is this your first time?
You know, I came here a long time ago, actually, before COVID, but this is my first time after COVID.
Okay,
yeah.
super. What's your impression? What's getting your attention here?
Yeah, so listen, when I first boarded the plane, I boarded probably everybody that was on the plane was coming to Cannes, so I felt a little overwhelmed just hearing the conversations. But coming here, I don't get that feeling. I actually find it really rewarding because I spend so much time at work and you get so busy. I feel like here is a place where you can get really great conversations going. And I'm usually pretty quiet and reserved, and what I've made myself do is just open up to just people, random people to talk to. And so even like waiting in line yesterday for lunch, someone else was waiting in line too, and I was like, well, if the lines are long, do you want to just join me? I have a table coming up. And so we just sat down and had really great conversations. So I feel like Cannes, if you
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, you can set up the right pacing. It's a great way to just meet, challenge yourself, and just talk to new people and get fresh perspectives. Yeah.
And we were talking before we start recording about diversity of thinking
Yes.
in marketing. And you grew up in Singapore, you're working in the US now, and your observations about the diversity of marketing departments and marketing groups and companies. Could you speak a bit more about that?
So I think we focus a lot on DE&I in its traditional sense, you know, and I think that's awesome. And we continue, I feel, to make progress in that area, you know, hiring women, having diversity of, you know, like physical appearances, skin color, and all that. What I feel the marketing organizations are still challenged on is diversity of thinking, right? Because when you hire, and if you read through what hiring criteria are, it's always you have to have an MBA preferred, but you typically have to have that, and then a certain formula of what marketing, or the best-in-class marketing needs to be. My perspective is coming from Singapore and more emerging markets or developing markets, it doesn't have to be that way. You know, I feel like some of the richest conversations and the richest way of delivering respectful candor in service of the business is just diversity of thinking and experiences where people can come and converge and share just their experiences and then be able to drive that through to execution. So for me, my perspective is, and when I hire, I look for people with different experiences that can be complementary to the team. You know, I think my criteria of hiring is a little bit different, but I enjoy just working with like-minded folks, but that can kind of challenge the way you think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I always tell my team, there's no one person that's the smartest in the room, right? It's the sum of all of us that makes us really unique and different. I guess that's why I like talking to all these random people on the streets.
That's marketing, right?
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
you're at high risk if you're out of touch.
Yeah, we're never curious enough to have conversations and ask questions. And sometimes, whether or not it's the right questions, just ask. And I think we, you know, a lot of times we go in with assumptions.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Curiosity is the most often cited skill when I ask people
Absolutely.
what's most important for to be a CMO.
But not often practiced.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or a different interpretation of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, you're in Cannes, first time since COVID. What's impressing you? What's getting your attention? You're meeting some random people, having good conversations. But is there anything here that has struck you that you'll talk about when you go home to your team? Any conversation or person or headline or work?
So a few things, and I actually wrote down a few notes, but one thing that struck me was I've been in a lot of, with AI, Gen AI, and data. I think a lot of the conversations I've been in is around data, how data enables marketing and creativity. I think that's the idea of it and the concept. But when you get to the crux of these conversations, and I think bringing it back to day trading attention, even myself, I get 5 minutes into conversation sometimes, I think about what am I having for dinner, or what,
It's easy to do in Cannes.
Because I get lost in the conversations because everything's so technical around how we utilize data, how we measure data measurement. It's all great and it's all important. but you lose sight of why we are in cans, which is the creativity and how that enables creativity, right? And so I was in a few interesting conversations yesterday and today where we pivoted the conversations to a more interesting space around, it's no longer around data scientists or how do you kind of get into the inertia of data and pull yourself out. It's really how do you use data with the end in mind, knowing what you're using the data for, make some hypotheses, and then use it to inspire creativity. So this whole idea of data artists is something I'm going to take back to my teams. I actually think it's a really interesting concept where you kind of combine both the art and the science of it together. Yeah.
So you've been at Sanofi about 1.5 years.
Yes.
What are you trying to do?
I don't know.
You don't know, right?
Totally
but
kidding.
you're 1.5 years in, so you have your footing.
Yes.
But change takes longer.
Absolutely.
So what are your priorities? I should better way to say it.
So one, I start with always the team and people, right? If the consumer health industry as a whole, we're all trying to figure out how to deliver growth and drive growth in a sustainable way, and that's not easy. Considering that it's not a category a lot of time based from an emotional standpoint, it's more form, function, problem, solution. And so to do that, a lot of the marketing teams are really tasked to drive transformation through driving change on their brands and capabilities. That being said, I think to a point about patience, that takes time, but it always starts from the people. And so for me, the first thing is, as we do I always tell people when you drive change and transformation, you need to think about not leaving a lot of dead bodies behind. Yeah. And so you need to create, while you do that, and as the change happens with talent, you need to make sure that the talent that is left, you need to support them, and then you need to think about being deliberate in terms of how you show up every day, so you create a safe space for them to continue to be fearless and brave in an environment that has a lot of change, right? So I think that's the first piece. Then changing and upskilling capabilities, to your point, takes time too. And so I've loved the fact that I've coming from developing markets and more advanced markets naturally, it creates the ability to go high and go low at the same time, because in some of these smaller markets, you don't have big teams. And so you have to do a lot of the work. And so now you get to be kind of visionary and coach. And so I do think it's great because as you transform capabilities, you need to start from the basics, which is what we've done in the last 1.5 years. But then how do you quickly catch up and move forward? And that's where I think working with partners externally too helps, because they bring in capabilities, maybe sometimes even quicker, in terms of how you move brands to culture. So I would say everything, but in a deliberate way. Once again, if you're trying to drive true growth and transformation, you need to start from the basics, like making sure you understand the drivers and drainers of your business, the numbers, all the way then through to how you execute and bring your brands to life and culture. So it's a little bit of both. It's a tricky situation, but I love it. There's not one day in my mind that I always run towards these roles, and that's why I think CMOs have short tenures, because the ones that want to try true transformation across industries run towards challenging roles like this. And in a short period of time, you are expected to deliver, right?
Tenures are getting a bit longer, so that's positive.
Yes.
Yeah, super. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of Cannes. Enjoy the rest of the summer. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you.